The song had returned. There was a mournful quality to that voice, a pure soprano that could make stones weep. The unseen singer let out her voice sweep over all those who could hear her, singing of love and sunshine, summer nights and glittering lakes. All sorts of things that could lift one's spirit, even as she sounded as though she wished to cry. Suddenly the song stopped. A terrible silence fell over the darkness, which was soon replaced by a blood-chilling scream from the singer. "No, no, please don't take them away from me! Stay back! Help! Someone! Anyone! Please!" Her scream pierced the darkness again, lasting for several minutes. She begged for mercy repeatedly, but it was obviously not given. The worst part was when she began weeping. Like everything good in her life had been stripped away, leaving her alone to the darkness. The young woman having the nightmare was weeping herself, as she struggled to return to consciousness. Her blood-red eyes opened slowly, and she laid the back of one hand against her sweaty forehead. She shook her head slightly, and sat up in a large canopy bed that she shared with her husband. "Why?" she whispered softly to herself, tears still falling down her pale cheeks. "Why do I keep having that dream?" This was the third night in a row that she had woken up crying over the nightmare. The young man at her side murmured softly in his sleep, like he was having a nightmare of his own. The raven-haired beauty smiled lovingly at him, and ran one gentle hand over his face and snow-white hair that fell over his head and across his pillow like swan feathers. The man smiled in his sleep, and sighed happily as he returned to slumber completely. Once her husband was fully asleep again, the woman slowly got out of bed so that she wouldn't wake him up, and pulled a soft yellow robe over her nightdress, so that she could walk over to the balcony just out the giant glass-paned door. She walked out onto it, and inhaled the fresh morning air lingeringly, as she often did while standing on this balcony. The red-eyed woman cast her eyes to the academy in the distance. Barely visible through the forest that stood between the school she had attended years before the newly constructed castle she now shared with her prince. There were days when she was still terrified to wake up to find out that he had chosen Tutu after all, and that she was still Kahari's daughter and champion of the monster raven. She took a deep breath to calm herself. No, those days were over. 5 years in the past, she had won her prince. Her abusive father was dead, and Tutu... Aru. Really? The dark-haired princess had to admit to herself she had always loved the girl who was once her rival, and been privately injured when they had competed for the prince's affections. She had never had a real friend before meeting the excitable redhead, and if truth were to be told, she still had some problems with letting other people than her husband, his knight, and her first friend too close to her heart. A few more tears fell down her face, but they were not from the dream. As the young woman rubbed the tears away with her sleeve of the robe, she heard fluttering of wings, and a soft landing on the balcony she was leaning against. She looked up, seeing a yellow duck, panting right in front of her, short with little wings hanging useless at her sides, since she had flown from the lake below her balcony. The red-eyed woman beamed sadly at the bird, and carefully picked her up to share a gentle hug. "I was just thinking about you, Aru. Did you have the dream again, too?" The little duck quacked sadly, nodding her head as tears filled her large sapphire eyes. "Who do you think the singer is, Aru?" the black-haired woman asked thoughtfully, holding the duck with one hand so that she could hold her chin with another. "Whoever it is, I wish I could help her. I don't know about you, but I can't take much more of her weeping every night." The yellow bird quacked again, agreeing with her human companion. The princess sighed and held her friend close, as she turned back to the room she shared with her husband. "Let's have an early breakfast, just you and me, okay?" Aru nodded, but the tall princess knew she was still troubled by something she could not say, thanks to her foul form. Without warning, there was a violent banging on the door, one that the raven-haired beauty knew well. Muto! Rue! the knight called out. His tone was strangely ecstatic, since he rarely lost his composure. Can I come in? It's important! Good news! Her husband recognized the voice too, as he sat up in bed with a soft sulk on his face. He glanced once more with golden eyes at his wife, to be sure that she was decent, and smiled at the bird in her arms, before calling out to the impatient knight. Come in, Fakir, and it had better be good. A tall youth with long spiky black hair, tied back into a low ponytail, threw open the door. A large piece of paper rolled up in his hand like a royal proclamation. His dark green eyes looked happier than Rue had ever seen them in years. The small yellow duck in the princess's arms quacked happily, and flew out of them in order to make a beeline for the handsome young knight. He smiled warmly at the little bird, and held out one hand to catch her and hold her against his chest in a caressing manner. Just trust me, Muto. This is the best news we've had since you defeated the raven, the knight said with a large grin, using the name he had personally given the prince when he was still the royal's keeper. That's wonderful, but are we actually going to find out what this great news is? The raven-haired princess teased him, as she sat down next to her husband and touched his hand. Take a good look at this, Fakir gloated, setting Aru on his shoulder so that he could unroll the long piece of paper in his hand and hold it open for the royal couple to view. Rue stared in amazement, as Muto's hand flinched noticeably underneath hers. She stood up from the bed in order to touch the poster. Who is this girl? She asked, taking the picture from him to study the young woman a little better. She looks familiar. The girl depicted in the poster was skinny, almost dangerously so, but her face was friendly, although slightly nervous, like she didn't like having her picture taken. She had huge brown eyes that seemed prone to daydream, with her hair just a shade darker, and swept away from her face in a high ponytail. She was in a schoolgirl's uniform, but it was not a style that Rue had ever seen before. Well, I hope she looks familiar. That, my friend, is none other than the daughter of Yoshioka Hasho, Fakir said with tears in his voice. The black-haired woman gasped, almost dropping the poster in her shock. But I thought his family was dead, she stammered. He apparently didn't talk about her a lot, at least while in the village, the knight said with a shrug. The funny part about all of this is that Charon says I used to play with her as a toddler before her family moved away from the village. Her name's Haru, by the way. Haru, the princess whispered, holding the poster against her like a long-lost treasure. It suits her. The white-haired prince, however, looked less than thrilled. Are you sure that's the right girl, Fakir? He asked in a steady voice, although his heart was less than so. Oh yes, and even if she wasn't, I would go down on my knees and beg for your help in bringing her back to Kinkan Town. Rue looked up at him sharply. Why? Why would you want her to return, if not for my sake? She asked almost defensively. Fakir grinned again and pointed to the duck on his shoulder, making her quack in confusion. I didn't tell you the best part yet. About a year ago, she saved a cat prince's life, and was changed into a feline after the messenger mistakenly told the Cat King that she wanted to marry his son. Not only did she fight her way out of the marriage against impossible odds, but she found a way to become human again. Nico-sensei has been sharing her story with the students for some time now, and it was pure chance that I overheard two of them while in the market yesterday. I'd have come sooner, but I had to break into the school to get the picture. Yuto's breath came in sharply as he stood up from the bed. Are you sure that she changed from a cat and to a human? Nico-sensei didn't have any pictures of her as a cat, but he was apparently very firm about the fact that she had changed species twice during her interactions with the Cat Kingdom, Fakir said firmly, smiling at the duck on his shoulder, who had become very silent, her sky-blue eyes wide with shock, and just a spark of hope. Rue's smile returned with a vengeance. Then she might know how to help Aru. I don't know about you, but I know I want to find out. The knight bowed low before the prince, with tears in his eyes. Please, Muto, grant me permission to invite her to come back. I'll need your help to execute my plan. Wouldn't it be easier to send a royal invitation? He asked in confusion. What? No, Rue said with shock. If she really got into a scrape like that with the Cat Prince, I doubt she'll want anything to do with you, or at least at first. I agree with her, Volkar said quickly, still kneeling in front of Muto. Please, I already know how to bring her here without a hitch. There's so much good that can happen if she returns to Kincan Town. The golden-eyed royal looked reluctantly at the poster in his beloved wife's arms, and sighed in defeat. Then why do I have such a bad feeling about this Haru? Do it. Bring her here, no matter what it takes. The knight smiled brightly, an expression that still sometimes felt odd on him, and rose to his feet. You wouldn't happen to have paper and ink on hand, would you?